March 4, 1944. 09:37 hours, 25,000 feet above Berlin. Dietrich von Arnheim's gloved hand rested on the control stick of his Messerschmitt Bf 109. Outside the canopy, the sky stretched crystalline blue, cold, perfect. 25,000 feet below Berlin, spread across the landscape like a grey stain on white snow. His altimeter read 7,620 meters. The airspeed indicator showed 540 kilometers per hour. Outside temperature minus 42 degrees Celsius. Oxygen flowed through the mask, pressed against his face, each breath frosting the inside of his goggles. He banked left, looked down. 300 American bombers filled the sky, Boeing B-17 flying fortresses in their tight combat box formations. 50 meters of vertical separation between each box, 100 meters horizontal. The geometry of aerial warfare made visible. Von Arnheim had seen this before. 18 months defending the capital. 47 confirmed kills. He knew what came next. The bombers would approach.
German fighters would attack. Some bombers would fall. Some German pilots would die. The survivors would go home. Tomorrow, they would do it again. But something was different today. Von Arnheim looked up, squinted into the sun at 9 o'clock high. Silver glints. Aircraft diving from 8 to 500 meters. His breath stopped. American fighters. Over Berlin, where every calculation said they could not be. In that instant, watching those impossible aircraft circle the bomber formation like protective wolves, Dietrich von Arnheim knew Germany had lost the war. Not because of this battle, because of an equation that had stopped working. 6 days earlier, February 28, 1944, Tempelhof Airfield, Berlin. The briefing room smelled of cigarette smoke and boot leather. 20 pilots sat on wooden benches. Von Arnheim stood at the blackboard, chalk in hand. Behind him, white lines and numbers covered the board like a proof in physics. Lieutenant Oskar Brenner sat in the front row.
22 years old, 87 hours total flight time, fresh from training school, nervous. Von Arnheim drew a line on the board. England to Berlin, 600 miles. The Americans have 2 fighter types that can escort their bombers, he said. His voice carried the clipped precision of a Prussian education. The P-47 Thunderbolt, combat radius with drop tanks 375 miles. He made a mark on the line, somewhere over the Dutch coast. The P-38 Lightning, combat radius 450 miles. Another mark, just past the German border. Berlin is 600 miles from their bases in England. Neither American fighter can reach us and return home. Von Arnheim turned to face the pilots. Behind him, the numbers spoke for themselves. Physics, engineering, the immutable laws that governed fuel consumption and engine performance. This means every bomber formation that attacks Berlin will be unescorted. They will be vulnerable.
We will have freedom to attack without fighting through fighter screens.
Brenner raised his hand. Hauptmann, what if they develop a longer-range fighter? Von Arnheim smiled, not unkindly. The boy was thinking. That was good. Lieutenant, I have been flying Messerschmitts for 4 years. I understand fuel calculations. To fly 600 miles, engage in combat, and return home requires approximately 1,300 miles of total range. No fighter aircraft in the world has that capability. The fuel weight alone would make the aircraft too heavy to fight. He tapped the blackboard. The numbers don't lie, Brenner. We own the sky beyond 400 miles. The other pilots nodded. Veterans. Men who had flown the Eastern Front, the Mediterranean, the defense of the Reich. They understood. Oberleutnant Rainer Faulkner, von Arnheim's wingman since 1942, spoke up. How many kills do we have over Berlin in the last 18 months, Hauptmann? Von Arnheim consulted his notes. 412 confirmed. 0 encounters with American escort fighters. Our losses 3.2% monthly. American bomber losses over Berlin 8.1%. The arithmetic works, Faulkner said. Major Horst Gessler, the squadron commander, stood. 35 years old, veteran of Poland, France, Britain, Russia. A pragmatist who trusted numbers over theories. Gentlemen, we fly a training sortie this afternoon. Brenner, you're with von Arnheim. Learn from him. He's the best pilot in this squadron. Von Arnheim had 47 confirmed kills. Gessler had 63. The compliment was generous. But Gessler was right about one thing. Von Arnheim was precise. Methodical. A student of aerial combat who treated every engagement like a chess problem. The briefing ended. Pilots filed out. Brenner lingered. Hauptmann, may I ask a question? Von Arnheim gathered his papers. Of course. Oberst Kraus mentioned a report about a new American fighter. He seemed concerned.
Von Arnheim paused. Krause, intelligence officer, 50 years old, a man who saw threats everywhere, real or imagined. Krause worries about many things, von Arnheim said. Most of them never materialize. But the question bothered him, just a little. 1,400 hours, training flight. Von Arnheim's Bf-109G6 sat on the tarmac like a predator. Daimler-Benz, DB605 engine, 12 cylinders in an inverted V configuration, 1,800 horsepower, the most powerful fighter engine Germany produced. He walked around the aircraft, pre-flight inspection, looking for problems that could kill. Oil leaks, none. Control surfaces, freedom of movement confirmed. Tires, acceptable pressure, ammunition, one 30mm Mk108 cannon, 60 rounds, two 13mm MG131 machine guns, 300 rounds each, fuel, 400 litres internal, 300-litre drop tank beneath the fuselage, 700 litres total, combat weight 400 kilograms. Maximum speed 640 kilometers per hour at 7,000 meters. Climb rate 17 minutes to 8,000 meters. These specifications defined the boundaries of the possible. Von Arnheim knew them the way a priest knows scripture. He climbed into the cockpit, settled into the seat. The fit was perfect. 4 years flying this aircraft type. The controls were extensions of his body. Engine start procedure, fuel valve open, throttle 1/4, magneto switch on, starter engaged. The DB605 coughed, caught, roared to life. The entire aircraft vibrated, 1,200 kilograms of torque transmitted through the propeller. Von Arnheim checked the instruments. Oil pressure rising, temperature normal, all systems green. He looked left. Brenner's 109 was running. The young pilot gave a thumbs up. Von Arnheim keyed the radio. Tower Adler flight ready for departure. Adler flight, you are cleared. Wind 270 at 15. Von Arnheim released the brakes. The Messerschmitt rolled forward, gathered speed. At 180 kilometers per hour, the tail lifted. At 220, the wheels left the ground. Berlin fell away beneath him, the city where he'd been born, where his father taught engineering at the university, where certainty was built on logic and proof. They climbed to 5,000 meters. Von Arnheim leveled off, checking his formation. Brenner held position 50 meters back, slightly high. Acceptable for a student pilot. Lieutenant, we will practice defensive maneuvers. I will attack. You will evade. Understand? Jawohl, Hauptmann. Von Arnheim banked hard left, pulled the stick back. The horizon spun. G-forces pressed him into the seat. 3 Gs, 4, 5. His vision narrowed at the edges, blood draining from his head toward his feet. He rolled inverted, pulled through, came out behind Brenner's aircraft. I have firing position, von Arnheim said. You are dead. What should you have done? Brenner's voice was tight.
Brake turn, Hauptmann. Incorrect. You should have seen me before I reached firing position. Situational awareness is more important than maneuverability. Try again. They repeated the exercise. Brenner improved, marginally. After 40 minutes, von Arnheim called it. Return to base. They landed. Brenner climbed out of his cockpit, pale, shaking slightly. The G-forces, he said. I nearly blacked out. Von Arnheim nodded. You will adapt, or you will die. Combat is more violent than training. Harsh words. True words. Brenner had 87 hours of total flight time. Von Arnheim had possessed 300 hours before his first combat mission in 1940. The difference mattered. Experience was the gap between survival and death. That evening, sitting in the officers' mess, von Arnheim wrote a letter to Katharina, his fiancée, 24 years old, working in a ball-bearing factory in Berlin. They would marry after the war, when Germany won. When the equations resolved in their favor. He wrote about certainty, about the sky over Berlin being safe, about the Americans' inability to escort their bombers deep into Germany. He believed every word. February 14th, 1944. Luftwaffe High Command, 2 weeks earlier. Oberst Leopold Krause entered General Major Konrad Steinhoff's office carrying a folder. Inside the folder was a document that would change everything, except nobody would believe it. Krause was 50 years old, intelligence officer, analyst, a man who had spent the war reading captured documents and interrogating prisoners. He had learned to recognize truth from fabrication. The document in his folder was truth. He knew it. Proving it would be another matter. Steinhoff sat behind his desk. 45 years old, inspector of fighters for the Luftwaffe, former ace from the First War, a man who had shot down 17 aircraft before his 20th birthday.
He understood aerial combat in his bones.
Von Arnheim sat to Steinhoff's right, present because Steinhoff valued technical analysis. The young captain had a mind for numbers. "Gentlemen," Krauss said, "I have intelligence regarding a new American fighter, the P-51D Mustang." He opened the folder, spread photographs on the desk, an aircraft with a distinctive design, laminar flow wings, bubble canopy, four-bladed propeller, a scoop beneath the fuselage. This aircraft was captured in a forced landing in France. Our technical team examined it. The results are disturbing. Steinhoff picked up a photograph, studied it. Specifications. Krauss consulted his notes. Packard Merlin 51650 engine, 1460 horsepower, maximum speed 710 kilometers per hour at 7,000 meters. Von Arnheim leaned forward. "That's faster than our 109s at altitude." "Yes," Krauss said, "but speed is not the concern. Range is the concern." He pulled out another document. Performance calculations.
Internal fuel capacity 184 gallons, with external drop tanks, two 110-gallon wing tanks plus one 75-gallon centerline tank. Total fuel load is 469 gallons. Steinhoff did the calculation in his head. That's 1,770 liters for a single-seat fighter. Correct. Their intelligence suggests this gives the aircraft a combat radius exceeding 650 miles, total mission range of approximately 1,300 miles. The room fell silent. Von Arnheim spoke first. "That's impossible. The fuel weight alone would be catastrophic. 469 gallons weighs 1,400 kilograms. Add the pilot ammunition and airframe you're looking at. 4,000 kilograms total weight. The aircraft couldn't fight." Krauss nodded. "That was our engineers' conclusion as well. They calculated that achieving this range would require significant compromises, reduced armament,
minimal armor protection, degraded maneuverability."
Steinhoff set down the photograph. "What does the intelligence say about armament?" 6 50-caliber machine guns, 400 rounds per gun. That's heavier firepower than our Bf-109. "Yes, sir." "And armor. Pilot protection comparable to our standards." Von Arnheim shook his head. "Then the range figures must be incorrect. You cannot have long-range heavy armament, adequate protection and good performance. Physics doesn't permit it." Krauss pulled out one more sheet. Fuel consumption data. The Packard Merlin engine consumes 0.45 pounds of fuel per horsepower per hour. Our Daimler-Benz 605 consumes 0.58. Their engine is significantly more efficient. Steinhoff considered this. "Even accounting for fuel efficiency, the numbers seem optimistic." "That was my assessment as well, sir. However, I recommend we take this seriously. If the Americans can field a fighter with this range, they can escort bombers to Berlin," Steinhoff finished. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Germany's entire air defense strategy was predicated on the assumption that American bombers would be unescorted over German targets. Fighters could be positioned near likely targets. They could wait for the escorts to turn back. Then they could attack vulnerable bombers at will. If American fighters could reach Berlin, that strategy collapsed. Von Arnheim picked up the documents, studied the numbers again, shook his head. "General Major, I've flown fighters since 1940. I understand fuel calculations. These numbers violate the fundamental physics of range versus payload. To achieve 1,300 miles, this aircraft would need to cruise at economical speed, maintain optimal altitude, carry minimal combat load, and avoid any maneuvering. Real combat conditions would reduce this range by 30 to 40%.
Steinhoff nodded slowly. "Your assessment, Oberst Krauss." Krauss met his eyes. "Sir, I believe this is Allied disinformation, designed to make us waste resources defending against a threat that doesn't exist." It was the safe answer, the logical answer, the answer that matched their understanding of aeronautical engineering. Steinhoff made his decision. "File this under Allied propaganda. Continue monitoring for any confirmation. If we see evidence of extended-range operations, we'll reconsider. Until then, our doctrine remains unchanged." Krauss gathered his papers, closed the folder, walked out. Von Arnheim remained behind. "Do you think it's true?" Steinhoff asked. Von Arnheim looked at the photograph one more time. The sleek lines, the laminar flow wing, the large fuel capacity. "No, sir. The calculations don't support it." He was wrong. In 18 days, he would learn exactly how wrong. March 1st, 1944. Combat over Brandenburg.
The bomber formation approached from the west. Von Arnheim counted them as his flight climbed to intercept. 200 B-17s, maybe more. Their contrails painted white lines across the blue sky. He checked his instruments. Altitude 7, 400 meters. Fuel 620 liters remaining. Ammunition full load. "Adler flight, prepare to engage."
Faulkner's voice crackled over the radio. "I see them, Hauptmann. No escorts visible." Of course, no escorts. Berlin was too far. Physics guaranteed it. Von Arnheim positioned his flight up-sun. The classic attack angle. Dive from above, fire, break away, hit and run. Preserve your energy. Live to fight tomorrow. He rolled inverted, pulled. Gravity and engine thrust combining to build speed. 600 kilometers per hour. 650. 700. The B-17s grew larger in his gun sight. He selected the lead bomber of the forward box. Aimed for the cockpit. 30mm cannon could punch through the B-17's frontal armor. Range 800 meters. 600. 400.
He pressed the trigger. The Mk-108 cannon bucked. 30mm shells arced toward the bomber. Tracer rounds showed the path. Hits. The B-17's number 3 engine erupted in black smoke. The bomber fell out of formation. Von Arnheim broke right. G-forces crushed him into the seat. 6 Gs, 7. His vision grayed. Behind him, defensive fire from 200 bombers filled the sky with steel. 50 caliber machine gun bullets, thousands per second. The air became lethal. But von Arnheim was already past them, below them, out of range. He climbed back to altitude, looked for the damaged bomber, saw it spiraling down, crew bailing out. 1, 2, 3 parachutes. His 48th kill. He felt nothing. Not pride, not guilt. Just the cold arithmetic of aerial combat. He had energy advantage. He used it. The bomber died. Tomorrow, he would do it again. That evening in the officers' mess, Faulkner raised his glass. "To number 48.
Von Arnheim touched glasses but didn't drink. He was thinking about something else. "The bombers seem nervous today," he said. "Tighter formations than usual." Faulkner shrugged. "They know we're here. They should be nervous." But it bothered von Arnheim. Something in the way they flew, anticipating something, expecting something. He pushed the thought away, drank his schnapps. Tomorrow was another mission. March 2nd, 1944. Intelligence briefing. Gessler stood at the front of the briefing room. Behind him, a map of Northern Europe. Pins marked bomber formations. Red for German fighters, blue for American. "Gentlemen, intelligence reports increased American fighter activity over the Channel. P-47 and P-38 squadrons conducting practice formations. Long-duration flights." Brenner raised his hand. Could they be preparing for extended escort missions? The room laughed. Even Faulkner smiled. Gessler's expression didn't change. "Lieutenant, the P-47's maximum combat radius is 375 miles. Practice formations don't change fuel capacity." More laughter. Von Arnheim didn't laugh. He remembered Krause's report, the P-51 Mustang, the impossible range. After the briefing, he found Gessler in his office. "Major, the intelligence report from February 14th, the one about the new American fighter. Do we have any updates?" Gessler shook his head. "Nothing confirmed. Why?" Brenner's question. "What if they have developed a longer-range fighter?" Gessler lit a cigarette, exhaled smoke. "Dietrich, you're the most technically minded pilot I know. You've analyzed the numbers. Is it possible?" Von Arnheim thought about it, really thought about it. "Theoretically, yes. If they've achieved significant improvements in engine efficiency, if they've optimized the airframe for range rather than maneuverability, if they're willing to accept certain performance limitations. But practically, it would be extremely difficult, and we've seen no evidence of it in operations." Gessler nodded. "Then we continue as planned." Von Arnheim left the office, but doubt had taken root. A small seed, growing. March 3rd, 1944, the last day of certainty. Von Arnheim shot down his 49th bomber over Magdeburg, a B-24 Liberator, damaged its number 2 engine, watched it struggle to maintain altitude. Eventually it fell away from formation, crashed somewhere south of the city. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt tired. 4 years of war, 4 years of killing, for what the Americans kept coming. More bombers, more crews, endless production capacity feeding an inexhaustible campaign. But at least over Berlin, the equation still held. At least deep in Germany, the Luftwaffe still had freedom to maneuver. At least the American fighters couldn't reach them. That evening, Faulkner mentioned something during dinner. "I saw strange contrails today. Higher than usual. Maybe 8,000 meters." Von Arnheim looked up. 8,000? That's above normal P-38 operating altitude. That's what I thought. Could be a reconnaissance variant. Or maybe just atmospheric conditions creating unusual contrails. Von Arnheim filed it away. Another small detail. Another piece that didn't quite fit. He went to his quarters, wrote another letter to Katerina. The Americans grow stronger every day, but they cannot reach Berlin with their fighters. This remains our sanctuary. Here we still have advantage. Here distance protects us. He sealed the letter, handed it to the orderly for posting. Outside the night was clear, cold, stars visible despite the blackout. Von Arnheim stood in the darkness and looked up. Somewhere out there in England, American pilots were preparing. American ground crews were loading fuel and ammunition. American commanders were planning tomorrow's raid.
And in 18 hours, Dietrich von Arnheim's understanding of aerial warfare would shatter like glass. March 4th, 1944. It was 6:23 hours. Radar contact. The operations officer burst into the barracks. Scramble large formation inbound 400-plus aircraft. Pilots rolled out of bunks, grabbed flight suits, boots, Mae Wests, parachutes. Von Arnheim was already dressed. He'd learned years ago to sleep in his flight suit. Saved 90 seconds during scramble. 90 seconds could mean life or death. Outside the tarmac erupted with controlled chaos. Pilots running to aircraft. Ground crews pulling wheel chocks. Engines starting. The roar of 68 Messerschmitt fighters coming to life simultaneously. Von Arnheim reached his aircraft. His crew chief handed him his helmet. "Fuel is full, Hauptmann. Ammunition loaded. She's ready." Von Arnheim climbed in, strapped himself down. 5-point harness. Tight. A loose harness could kill you in high G maneuvers. Engine start.
The familiar routine. The DB-605 caught immediately. His crew chief knew how to maintain engines. Tower came over the radio. "All flights scramble immediately. Vector 270. Climb to 7,000 meters. Large raid approaching from west." Von Arnheim released brakes, rolled forward. The entire squadron was launching. Aircraft taking off every 30 seconds. Maximum sortie generation. His wheels left the ground. Landing gear retracted. He climbed west, toward the bomber formation, toward destiny. At 2,000 meters, he looked back. Berlin spread below, the city he was defending, the city that every calculation said was safe. At 4,000 meters, he checked his formation. Faulkner on his wing, Brenner with the second element, Gessler leading the high cover, 30 fighters in tight formation, predators rising to meet their prey. At 6,000 meters, he leveled briefly, let the engine temperature stabilize, checked all systems, everything green. At 7,400 meters, he saw them.
Contrails. Hundreds of white lines. The bomber formation. Von Arnheim's pulse was steady. He'd done this dozens of times, hundreds of times. This was routine. The clock read 0847. They were 23 minutes from intercept. All flights tally the bombers. I count 300 plus B-17s, combat box formation, no escorts visible. Of course, no escorts. Berlin was 600 miles from England. The P-47s and P-38s would have turned back by now. The laws of fuel consumption guaranteed it. Von Arnheim checked his instruments one final time. Altimeter 7, 620 meters. Airspeed 540 kilometers per hour. Fuel 580 liters. Ammunition full load. Oxygen flowing normally. Outside temperature minus 42 degrees Celsius. Everything was perfect. Everything was normal. Everything was proceeding according to the physics that had governed air combat for 4 years. 15 minutes to intercept. Von Arnheim positioned his flight up-sun. The classic attack angle.
He'd done this so many times he could do it blind. 10 minutes. He could see individual bombers now, counted the combat boxes, estimated altitude, calculated approach vector, 5 minutes, range 4,000 meters, closing at 200 meters per second. Adler flight, prepare to engage on my mark. 3 minutes, range 2,000 meters. Von Arnheim's finger rested on the trigger. The Mk108 cannon was loaded. 60 rounds of 30mm depth. 1 minute, range 800 meters. Something felt wrong. The bombers were flying differently, not defensively, almost confidently. 30 seconds. Von Arnheim looked up, checking for diving attacks from above. Standard procedure. And there they were. Silver glints, high in the sun, diving from 8 to 500 meters. Aircraft with distinctive profiles. Laminar flow wings, bubble canopies, 4-bladed propellers, scoops beneath their fuselages. P-51 Mustangs. Over Berlin, where they could not be.
Where every calculation said they couldn't reach. Dietrich von Arnheim's breath stopped. His mind raced through calculations. England to Berlin, 960 kilometers. Round trip 920 kilometers. Plus combat reserves. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Except they were here. The radio erupted. Amerikanische Jäger. Mustangs. They can't be here. How are they here? Von Arnheim counted them. 41 P-51s.
diving from altitude, building speed, moving to engage. In that instant, everything changed. Not just the tactical situation, not just this mission, everything. The calculations that had protected Berlin were obsolete. The doctrine that had defended Germany was finished. The assumptions that had shaped Luftwaffe strategy were shattered. Von Arnheim keyed his radio. His voice was steady, professional, betraying none of the ice forming in his stomach. All flights engage the escorts. Protect each other. Watch your fuel. The P-51s were diving now 800 kilometers per hour, kilometers per...
Maybe more. Faster than his Messerschmitt at this altitude. Von Arnheim broke hard right. G-forces slammed him into the seat. His vision narrowed. The horizon spun. A silver P-51 flashed past. Close. So close he could see the pilot's helmet. He pulled harder. 7 Gs. 8. On the edge of blackout. The Messerschmitt groaned. Airframe stressed to its limits. The P-51 followed, matching his turn, not losing position. Von Arnheim's mind was cold, analytical, even in combat, even facing death. The P-51 could match his turn rate at altitude. It was faster in level flight. It had altitude advantage. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible realization was forming. If these aircraft had flown from England to Berlin, if they were engaging in combat now, if they still had enough fuel to escort bombers back to England, then they had fuel reserves that dwarfed anything German fighters possessed. They could fight as long as they wanted.
Press engagement without fuel concerns. Turn back when they chose to, not when physics forced them. The equation had inverted. Luftwaffe fighters were now the ones constrained by fuel. American fighters had freedom. The sky that had been Germany's fortress was now America's hunting ground. And Dietrich von Arnheim, who had trusted in calculations his entire life, who had built his confidence on immutable laws of physics and engineering, understood in that terrible moment above Berlin that everything he believed was wrong. The impossible had become real. The equation had broken. The sky was falling. March 4th, 1944. 9:37 hours. The engagement. The P-51 came out of the sun like a silver arrow. Von Arnheim saw it for half a second before he reacted. Years of training compressed into instant action. Stick hard right. Full aileron. The Messerschmitt snapped into a turn. 7 Gs crushed him into the seat. His vision tunneled, blood draining from his head toward his feet.
The oxygen mask bit into his face. He tasted copper. Bit his tongue during the maneuver. The horizon rotated. Sky became ground. Ground became sky. Berlin wheeled beneath him. The bomber formation disappeared from view. He held the turn, muscles straining against G-forces. The Bf-109 groaned. Metal stressed to design limits. Turn radius at this altitude and speed approximately 450 meters. The P-51 followed. Not close, but following, maintaining the turn, not hemorrhaging altitude or energy the way a heavy fighter should. Von Arnheim reversed, snapped the stick left. The Messerschmitt flipped, changed direction in an instant. A tactic that worked against P-47s, against P-38s, against anything that couldn't match the 109's roll rate. The P-51 reversed with him. Von Arnheim's instrument panel blurred past his vision. Altimeter unwinding. 7,400 meters, 7,200, 7,000. He was bleeding altitude, converting height to speed, the classic energy fight. He pulled out of the dive. Built speed, 680 kilometers per hour, 700, 720. Looked back. The P-51 was still there, still in trail, maybe 600 meters back. And it wasn't closing, wasn't pressing, just following, patient, like it had all the time in the world. Von Arnheim's tactical mind processed this even through the adrenaline. The American pilot wasn't making mistakes, wasn't overcommitting, wasn't acting like someone worried about fuel. His fuel gauge read 520 liters, maybe 35 minutes before he'd have to disengage, regardless of the tactical situation. He'd already burned 60 liters in 8 minutes of combat. How much fuel did the P-51 have? The physics that had seemed so certain yesterday were now weapons pointing at his own throat. Von Arnheim tried a zoom climb. Full throttle, pull the stick back, convert speed to altitude. The DB-605 engine screamed. The propeller clawed at thin air. He climbed. 7,200 meters, 7,400, 7,600, back to his starting altitude. The P-51 climbed with him.
Not struggling, not falling behind, just climbing, matching him. Impossible. At this altitude, the Messerschmitt should have advantage, should outclimb American fighters. That's what all the performance charts said. But the charts were wrong, or incomplete, or based on assumptions that no longer applied. Von Arnheim leveled off, checked his 6. The P-51 was still there, still patient, still waiting. He keyed the radio. Faulkner status, static. Then engaged with 2 bandits, Hauptmann. They're fast, very fast. More voices on the radio, fragments of combat, panic creeping into some transmissions. Can't shake him. 3 on my tail. Brenner, break right. Mein Gott, there are dozens of them. Von Arnheim forced himself to focus. Forget the radio chatter, forget everyone else. Survive your own engagement first, then worry about the squadron. He rolled inverted, split S, a desperate maneuver that traded altitude for speed and separation. Negative G forces.
His body lifting against the harness, loose items floating, the world inverted. He pulled through. Dove, 400 meters, 7,000, 6,500, speed building, 740 kilometers per hour, 760, 780, pulled out at 6,000 meters, 7 Gs again, vision graying, grunting against the pressure, tightening abdominal muscles to keep blood in his head. Looked back. The P-51 had followed through the split S, was pulling out now, 800 meters back, still in trail, still waiting. Von Arnheim's hands were steady on the controls, but inside a cold horror was growing, not fear of death. He'd faced death for 4 years, fear of something worse, obsolescence. He was flying a Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6, one of the best fighters Germany produced. He had 4 years of combat experience, 49 confirmed kills. He knew every trick, every tactic, every technique that aerial combat had taught him, and none of it mattered. The American behind him was simply better equipped, better positioned, better fueled.
He checked his watch. 0951, 14 minutes since first engagement. His fuel gauge read 480 litres. 40 litres burned in 6 minutes of hard manoeuvring. At this rate, he had 28 minutes before he had to disengage. The P-51 could fight for another hour, maybe 2, maybe 3. Von Arnheim made his decision. Survival first, pride second. He broke off, dove away from the engagement, full throttle, heading east, toward Berlin, toward base, trading all his remaining altitude for speed. The P-51 didn't follow, just circled back toward the bomber formation. Mission accomplished, German fighter driven away, bombers protected. Von Arnheim leveled at 4,000 meters, throttled back, economical cruise, preserving fuel. He looked back at the battle. The sky was full of contrails, spiraling, twisting, the geometry of death. He counted fires, parachutes, aircraft going down. Too many German aircraft, not enough American. The radio was chaos now, pilots calling for help. Reporting kills, reporting being hit. The normal structure of combat communications had broken down. Gessler's voice cut through. All flights disengage, return to base, repeat disengage and return to base. Von Arnheim checked his formation. Faulkner was 2 kilometers away. Aircraft smoking slightly, but flying, alive. Where was Brenner? Brenner, report. Silence. Lieutenant Brenner, report your status. More silence. Von Arnheim scanned the sky, looked for the distinctive silhouette of Brenner's 109. Didn't see it. Another voice came on the radio. I saw Brenner go down. He bailed out. Parachute deployed. Northwest of the city. Relief. Then guilt at feeling relief. Brenner was alive. But his aircraft was gone. And Brenner had 87 hours of experience. Not enough to survive against P-51s. Von Arnheim flew east. Watched his fuel gauge. 420 litres. 380. 340. Behind him the bombers proceeded to their target. The Erkner ball-bearing plant. Unescorted German fighters had been driven away. The P-51s circled like protective wolves. The equation had inverted. Von Arnheim landed at Tempelhof at 10:24 hours, 51 minutes of flight time. His fuel gauge read 280 litres, 27 minutes of fuel remaining. He'd fought for 41 minutes, been forced to disengage not because he was losing, but because continuing meant running out of fuel before reaching base. The Americans had fought for 41 minutes, and then kept fighting, because they could. He shut down the engine, sat in the cockpit, didn't move. The crew chief climbed up. Hauptmann, are you injured? Von Arnheim looked at him. No, not injured. But something inside him was broken. Not his body, his certainty. 11:45 hours. Debriefing. The briefing room stank of sweat and smoke and defeat. 57 pilots had returned from 68 launched. 11 missing. 3 confirmed dead. 8 status unknown.
Brenner found alive but injured. Von Arnheim sat in the front row, Faulkner beside him, both silent. Gessler stood at the front. His face was granite. "Report your engagements. Start with visual identification. I want details." Von Arnheim stood. P-51 Mustangs. Confirmed visual identification. Wingspan approximately 11 meters. Four-bladed propeller. Distinctive radiator scoop beneath fuselage. Bubble canopy. Performance, Gessler asked. Speed advantage at altitude. I estimate 710 to 720 kilometers per hour at 7,500 meters. Competitive climb rate. Turn radius comparable to Bf-109 at high speed. Armament heavy. I observed at least 6 gun muzzles in the wings. Combat duration. I was engaged for 41 minutes before disengaging due to fuel concerns. The enemy aircraft did not appear constrained by fuel state. Gessler wrote this down. Looked up. Did they pursue when you disengaged? No, sir. They returned to bomber escort duties.
Other pilots gave similar reports. The pattern was consistent. P-51s with superior speed at altitude, good maneuverability, heavy armament, and seemingly unlimited fuel. The door opened. General Major Steinhoff entered. Behind him, Oberst Krauss. The room fell silent. Steinhoff's presence meant this was serious. Official. This wasn't just a bad mission. This was a strategic crisis. Steinhoff walked to the front, looked at the assembled pilots. Veterans. Men who had fought on every front. Men who knew aerial combat. Gentlemen, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you didn't see American fighters over Berlin. No one spoke. The silence was answer enough. Krauss stepped forward, opened his folder. The same folder from February 14th. The intelligence report that had been dismissed as propaganda. P-51D Mustang. Packard Merlin V1650 engine. Fuel consumption 0.45 pounds per horsepower per hour. Internal fuel 184 gallons.
External tanks 269 gallons. Total 453 gallons. He looked up. I calculate mission profile as follows. Takeoff from England approximately 0700 hours. Transit to Berlin 2.5 hours. Combat overhead Berlin 45 minutes. Return transit 2.5 hours. Total mission duration 6 hours. Fuel required at combat power settings approximately 420 gallons. The numbers filled the room. Undeniable. Precise. They had reserve fuel, Krauss said. 30 gallons minimum, perhaps more. They could have fought longer if needed. Faulkner spoke up. How is this possible? How did we not know? Steinhoff's voice was tired. We knew. The intelligence report was accurate. We chose not to believe it. He looked at von Arnheim. Hauptmann, you were present when we reviewed this report. You said the numbers violated physics. What do you say now? Von Arnheim stood, met Steinhoff's eyes. I was wrong, sir. The numbers don't violate physics. They just exceed what we thought was possible. The Merlin engine is more efficient than our DB605. Their fuel system is better optimized. Their operational doctrine accepts risks we don't. What risks? They flew to Berlin with minimal fuel reserves. They accepted the possibility of aircraft running dry and ditching in the North Sea. They prioritized mission over safety margins. It's aggressive. It's dangerous. But it works. Steinhoff nodded slowly, turned to the assembled pilots. Casualties. Gessler consulted his notes. 11 aircraft lost. 3 pilots confirmed killed. 1 injured. 7 missing presumed dead or captured. Enemy losses. 3 P-51s confirmed destroyed. Possibly 2 more damaged. The arithmetic of that exchange ratio hung in the air. 11 German fighters for 3 American. Nearly 4 to 1. Unsustainable. Bomber losses, Steinhoff asked. Unknown at this time, but the bombers reached their target.
Erkner ball-bearing plant. We failed to prevent the attack. For 4 years, German fighters had successfully defended Berlin. Not perfectly. Some bombers always got through, but enough were shot down to make the raids costly, to force the Americans to pause, to rebuild, to reconsider. Today, the defense had failed. The P-51s had done their job, protected the bombers, driven away the defenders, allowed the attack to proceed unimpeded. Steinhoff turned to Krauss. Analysis. Krauss didn't need notes. If March 4th was anomalous, we survive. If March 4 was standard operations, we face strategic defeat. Everything depends on whether they can sustain this effort. Your assessment. They can sustain it. They have 15,000 P-51s in production or planned production. We have fuel for maybe 300 operational sorties per day across all fronts. The numbers favor them. Steinhoff looked at his pilots. Men he'd commanded. Men he'd trained. Men who trusted him to make correct decisions.
Gentlemen, if they can reach Berlin, they can reach anywhere in Germany. There is no safe distance anymore.
Every target we defend can now be escorted. Our strategy of waiting for escorts to turn back is obsolete. We must develop new tactics immediately. Von Arnheim raised his hand. General Major, what about tomorrow? Will they come back tomorrow? Steinhoff's face was stone. I expect they will, Hauptmann. I expect they will come back every day until we stop them or the war ends. And based on today's exchange ratio, I'm not confident we can stop them. The briefing ended. Pilots filed out. Von Arnheim remained seated, thinking. Faulkner sat beside him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about the real numbers, not the comfortable assumptions we believed. Tell me. Von Arnheim pulled out paper, started writing. Numbers, equations, the cold logic of attrition. Today we lost 11 fighters. They lost 3.
Ratio 3.7 to 1. Assume we improve tactics. Assume we get that down to 3 to 1. Still unsustainable. Why? Pilot replacement. We're producing perhaps 2,000 pilots per year. Training time 6 months minimum. Flight hours before combat 100 if they're lucky. The Americans are producing 10,000 pilots per year. Training time 12 months. Flight hours before combat 200 plus. So they have quantity. They have quantity and quality. Their pilots arrive better trained. Ours arrive desperate. And every day we fight at 3 to 1 loss ratios, we lose 3 experienced pilots for every one they lose. We're hemorrhaging veterans, replacing them with barely trained boys. Faulkner was silent. Von Arnheim continued. Now add fuel. Every bomber raid on our refineries reduces our fuel production. Less fuel means less training for new pilots. Less training means higher casualties. Higher casualties mean more replacements needed.
More replacements mean less fuel per pilot. It's a spiral, feedback loop, accelerating toward collapse.
How long? Months, 6 months, maybe less. By summer, we won't have enough experienced pilots to mount effective defense. By fall, we won't have fuel to fly the aircraft we do have. Faulkner stood. You should tell Steinhoff. He knows. Kraus knows. Everyone who can calculate knows. We're just not saying it out loud. March 5th, 1944. 800 hours. High Command. Von Arnheim wasn't present at the High Command meeting, but he heard the results. Everyone heard the results. Decisions that shaped the future of the war filtered down through official channels and unofficial gossip. 3 options had been debated. Option 1. Mass numerical superiority. Concentrate every available fighter against P-51 escorts. Overwhelm them through sheer numbers. Accept heavy casualties, but break through to attack bombers. Problem: German fighter production couldn't sustain the losses.
3 to 1 exchange ratio meant exhausting fighter strength in weeks. Option 2. Intercept farther west. Engage American formations over France or the Low Countries before they reached German airspace. Force combat where German fighters had fuel advantage. Problem: Americans still had fuel advantage even over France, and intercepting farther west meant German fighters burned fuel reaching interception points. Reduced time over target. Same problem, different location. Option 3. Abandon daylight defense entirely. Concede the day to American bombers. Focus on night operations where P-51s couldn't operate. Problem: politically impossible, militarily devastating. Admitting defeat. The decision: fight. Continue daylight defense. Develop new tactics. Hope for miracle weapons. Hope the Americans make mistakes. Hope fuel shortages limit their operations. Hope. The projections didn't support hope, but hope was all they had. March 6, 1944. 0700 hours. They came back.
400 bombers, 50 P-51 escorts, maybe more. The radar plots looked like a swarm.
Von Arnheim stood at the briefing board. 80 Luftwaffe fighters assembled, every available aircraft from 3 airfields, massed defense, numerical superiority. Gessler gave the briefing. Gentlemen, we're trying new tactics. We concentrate on the escorts. Ignore the bombers initially, drive away the P-51s, then attack the bombers when they're vulnerable. Faulkner raised his hand. Sir, yesterday we learned the P-51s have unlimited fuel. We don't. How do we drive them away? Gessler's jaw tightened. We make them choose. Protect bombers or engage us. If they engage us, bombers are vulnerable. If they protect bombers, we dictate engagement terms. It was logical. Sound tactics. Except it assumed the P-51s would make mistakes, would accept our terms, would fight the way we wanted them to fight. Von Arnheim doubted they would. They launched 80 aircraft.
The largest defensive sortie in weeks. Climbed to 7,500 meters. Waited for contact. The bombers came. Right on schedule. Same formations.
Same altitude, same confidence, and the P-51s were already there. High cover at 8,500 meters, middle screen at 7,500 meters, close escort at 7,000 meters, 3 layers of defense. The Americans had learned too, adapted their tactics, positioned themselves for maximum advantage. Gessler ordered the attack anyway. All flights engage the high cover, drive them down. 80 German fighters climbed, the P-51s dove to meet them. The sky became chaos. Von Arnheim fired his cannon at a P-51. Missed. The American broke left. Von Arnheim followed. Another P-51 appeared on his 6. He broke right, lost the first target, evaded the second, looked for targets, saw only confusion. Aircraft everywhere, contrails twisting, tracer rounds arcing, explosions, parachutes, smoke trails. He fought for 15 minutes.
Burned 180 rounds of machine gun ammunition, 20 rounds of cannon, hit nothing, was hit once, 20mm hole through his left wing, non-critical damage. Faulkner's voice on the radio, calm, professional. 2 on my tail, can't shake them. Von Arnheim looked, saw Faulkner 3 kilometers away, 2 P-51s pursuing, closing. He dove, full throttle, trying to reach his wingman, the man who had flown beside him since 1942, 31 kills, best pilot in the squadron after von Arnheim. He was too far, the angles were wrong, the P-51s were too fast. He watched, helpless. The P-51s fired, 50 caliber tracers, hundreds of rounds, walking up Faulkner's fuselage. The Messerschmitt shuddered, pieces flew off, the canopy shattered. Faulkner's aircraft rolled, inverted, dove, trailing black smoke. At 4,000 meters it exploded, hit by a damaged B-17 trying to maintain formation. Both aircraft disintegrated, fireball, debris, no parachute. Rainer Faulkner, dead after 4 years.
After Russia, after North Africa, after France, dead over Berlin, because American fighters could now reach Berlin.
Von Arnheim felt nothing. Shock, perhaps. The feeling would come later. Right now, he had to survive. His fuel gauge unwound steadily, 380 litres, 24 minutes to bingo. He'd been fighting for 18 minutes. Around him, the battle continued. But the outcome was already decided. The P-51s outnumbered them locally, had altitude advantage, speed advantage, fuel advantage, position advantage, every advantage. Gessler ordered withdrawal. All flights disengage, return to base. Von Arnheim turned east, flew home, landed with 260 litres of fuel, 18 minutes remaining. The butcher's bill came later. 69 German fighters destroyed, 11 American aircraft, 6 P-51s, 5 bombers. Exchange ratio 6.3 to 1. In 2 days of combat against P-51s, Germany had lost 80 fighters. America had lost 14 aircraft total.
The arithmetic was catastrophic. March 8, 1944. They came again. Von Arnheim flew, fought, survived, shot down nothing, was nearly shot down twice, landed with minimum fuel. Brenner returned to duty, arm in a cast from his bailout, hands shaking, eyes distant. He'd seen too much too fast. 87 hours of training, 1 combat mission, shot down, barely survived. And now he was flying again, because Germany needed pilots, needed warm bodies in cockpits, needed anyone who could hold a stick and pull a trigger. After the mission, von Arnheim found Brenner in the barracks. The young lieutenant was sitting on his bunk, staring at nothing. "How are you feeling?" Brenner looked up. "I froze, sir. During the engagement, I knew what to do, but I couldn't do it. My hands wouldn't move. My mind went blank. I just flew straight while they shot at me." "You bailed out. That took courage." "I bailed out because my aircraft was on fire, not because I decided to."
Because I had no choice. Von Arnheim sat beside him. Didn't know what to say. What comfort could he offer? That it gets easier. That the fear fades. Both would be lies. "Lieutenant, you have 87 hours of flight time. I had 300 before my first combat. The veterans from the Eastern Front had 500. We're sending you into combat unprepared. Not because we want to, because we must. Will I survive?" Von Arnheim wanted to lie, wanted to say yes, wanted to give hope, but he respected Brenner enough to tell truth. "I don't know. The statistics say most pilots with less than 100 hours of experience survive an average of 1.7 missions. You've already beaten that average. But statistics don't know individuals. Stay with formation. Don't chase kills. Focus on survival. That's all you can do." Brenner nodded. Didn't seem comforted, but seemed to appreciate honesty. That night von Arnheim couldn't sleep. Kept seeing Faulkner's aircraft exploding. Kept running fuel calculations. Kept understanding more clearly what was happening. Germany was losing the air war. Not slowly, quickly, catastrophically, and nobody could stop it. March 15th, 1944. Replacements. 14 new pilots arrived. Von Arnheim assembled them in the briefing room, looked at their faces. Young, so young. Average age 19.3 years. He asked them their flight hours, wrote the numbers on the blackboard. 76 hours, 82, 91, 68, 87. The numbers averaged 83 hours. Von Arnheim had 370 hours before his first combat mission in 1940. These boys had barely enough time to learn basic aircraft operation. Advanced tactics, combat maneuvering, gunnery. None of them had adequate training in any of it. "Gentlemen," he said, "I'm going to be honest with you. Your training is insufficient. You are being sent into combat unprepared. This is not your fault. This is not your instructor's fault.
This is necessity. Germany needs pilots. You are pilots. Therefore you will fly." He paused. Let that sink in. "I will try to teach you what I can in the time we have. 3 days, 72 hours. It's not enough, but it's what we have." A hand went up. Lieutenant Klaus Becker, 18 years old, 76 hours of flight time, barely old enough to shave. "Hauptmann, what are our chances?" Von Arnheim considered lying, decided against it. Based on current statistics, pilots with less than 100 hours of experience survive an average of 1.7 missions. Some survive longer. Some die on their first sortie. The best way to improve your odds is to fly smart. Stay in formation. Don't chase kills. Survive the mission. Come back. Learn. Get better. Eventually you become veteran enough to have a chance. How many missions until we're veterans? 20. If you survive 20 missions, your odds improve significantly. But most pilots don't survive 20 missions.
The room was silent. Von Arnheim could see them doing the arithmetic. 1.7 average survival. 20 missions needed. The numbers didn't add up. He spent 3 days teaching them. Basic defensive maneuvers, energy management, situational awareness, how to bail out if hit, how to identify P-51s versus P-47s versus P-38s, how to estimate fuel remaining by engine sound and instrument readings. 3 days. 72 hours. Compressed instruction that should have taken months. On March 18th, they flew their first mission. 8 of the 14 new pilots, von Arnheim leading. 3 didn't come back. Klaus Becker, Franz Hartmann, Josef Schneider, 18 years old, 20 years old, 19 years old. Combined flight time, 234 hours. Combined combat experience, 1 mission. Dead. Von Arnheim wrote the letters to their families, told them their sons had died bravely, defending the Reich, performing their duty.
He didn't tell them their sons had died because Germany was running out of fuel, running out of time, running out of hope, sending children into combat against veterans because there was no one else left. He didn't tell them the war was already lost. Reality had decided. The sky had fallen. March 4th was the moment of death. Everything since was just the body realizing it was dead. April 1944. The spiral. The raids continued, every few days, sometimes daily. American bombers with P-51 escorts, attacking oil refineries, ball-bearing factories, aircraft production facilities, rail yards, every target that mattered. German fuel production dropped, 100% in January, 92% in February, 84% in March, 72% in April. The curve was downward, accelerating. Less fuel meant less training. 60 hours per month in January, 40 hours in March, 25 hours in April. New pilots arriving with less preparation, dying faster. Needing more replacements, burning more fuel per capita because they flew inefficiently. The feedback loop was tightening, every element feeding every other element, compounding, accelerating collapse. Von Arnheim watched it happen, watched new pilots arrive, watched them die, wrote letters, trained more pilots, watched them die, repeated the cycle. He was 51 kills now, up from 49 on March 1st, 2 kills in 5 weeks. He'd stopped hunting, started surviving. Personal victory had become irrelevant compared to strategic defeat. On April 24th, he witnessed BMW factory burning, Munich suburb, the factory that produced Bf-109 engines, 600 per month, critical to fighter production. American bombers hit it, direct hits, 80% destroyed, secondary explosions, smoke visible from 30 kilometers. Von Arnheim was overhead, flying combat air patrol, trying to intercept.
But the P-51s kept him away from the bombers, kept him defensive.
Kept him reacting instead of attacking. He watched the factory burn, watched Germany's ability to produce fighters literally going up in smoke, watched the future collapse in real time, and he thought about Katerina, his fiancée, working in a similar factory in Berlin, producing ball bearings, critical war material. How long before American bombers reached her factory? How long before she was standing beneath falling bombs? How long before he got a telegram? He pushed the thought away, focused on flying, on surviving, on getting his pilots home. After landing, he found Gessler in the operations room. "We can't keep doing this," von Arnheim said. "We're losing 3 fighters for every one they lose. At this rate, we'll be out of pilots by summer." Gessler looked up from his paperwork. His eyes were tired, older than they'd been in March. "I know the arithmetic, Dietrich. High command knows. Everyone knows."
But what choice do we have? Surrender. Let them bomb Germany unopposed. I'm not saying surrender. I'm saying acknowledge reality. We can't win the air war, not against unlimited American production and P-51 range. The best we can do is make it expensive, preserve our veteran pilots, stop throwing away lives on missions we can't win. Every mission we fly delays their advance. Every bomber we shoot down is one less bomb on German cities. Every day we fight is one more day the ground forces have to prepare defenses. Von Arnheim wanted to argue, wanted to show Gessler the curves, the projections, the inevitable conclusion. But he saw it in Gessler's eyes. The Major already knew, already understood, already accepted. They were flying not because they could win, but because stopping meant admitting defeat, and admitting defeat was worse than dying. Von Arnheim walked out, stood in the spring air, looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, American pilots were flying, training,
Preparing for tomorrow's raid, flying aircraft with unlimited range, with fuel to spare, with confidence born of superior numbers. And down here, German pilots were preparing to meet them, with less fuel, less training, less hope. The sky that had once been Germany's fortress was now Germany's grave. The calculations that had once protected them now condemned them. March 4th had inverted the equation. Everything since was just watching the solution resolve. Dietrich von Arnheim, who had trusted in numbers his entire life, finally understood that some equations have only one answer. Defeat. June 6, 1944. D-Day, Normandy, France. Dietrich von Arnheim sat in the operations room at Tempelhof, listening to reports from the Western Front, American and British forces landing on French beaches, thousands of ships, hundreds of thousands of men, the largest amphibious invasion in history, and overhead complete Allied air superiority.
The Luftwaffe had launched 64 fighters to contest the landings. 64 aircraft against 3,000 Allied fighters and bombers. The odds were absurd. Suicidal. Of those 64, 23 had been shot down, 11 more damaged beyond repair, 34 losses in a single day, for negligible effect on the invasion. Von Arnheim studied the casualty reports. Pilots he'd known, pilots he'd trained with, names becoming statistics, lives becoming numbers in the ledger of defeat. Krauss entered the room, set down another folder. Analysis of Normandy air operations. Von Arnheim opened it. Read. The conclusion was obvious before he finished the first page. The Luftwaffe's inability to contest Normandy airspace was direct consequence of what had happened over Berlin in March. The best pilots had been killed defending the Reich. The fuel reserves had been depleted by bombing campaigns. The aircraft production had been disrupted. The veteran corps had been destroyed. March 4th. The day P-51s appeared over Berlin. The day the equation inverted. That single day had created a cascade that led directly to this moment. Allied troops landing unopposed from the air. "We lost the war in Normandy today," Krauss said. Von Arnheim shook his head. "No, we lost it on March 4th, over Berlin. Normandy is just the consequence playing out." He closed the folder, looked at the map on the wall, red pins showing German positions, blue pins showing Allied advances. The blue was spreading, growing, inevitable. "How much fuel allocation do we have for defensive operations today?" Von Arnheim asked. Krauss checked his notes. "Enough for 37 sorties, total, across all of Eastern Germany." 37 sorties. To defend an entire nation. Von Arnheim had flown 37 sorties in a single month back in 1942. Now that was the daily allocation for the entire defensive network.
And tomorrow, less. Von Arnheim stood.
Walked to the window. Outside, the tarmac was quiet. Half the aircraft grounded, not for maintenance, not for tactical reasons, for lack of fuel. The bombers had done their work. Plosti oil fields in Romania reduced to 40% capacity. German synthetic fuel plants 70% destroyed or damaged. Every refinery that mattered bombed repeatedly. And every bombing raid had been escorted by P-51s, fighters that could fly anywhere. Protect bombers anywhere. Make sustained strategic bombing sustainable. The equation was elegant in its brutality. P-51 range enabled bomber protection. Bomber protection enabled systematic destruction of fuel production. Reduced fuel production degraded fighter operations. Degraded fighter operations enabled more bombing. The loop closed, fed itself, accelerated toward inevitable conclusion. Von Arnheim was grounded that day. No fuel allocation for training flights, no missions assigned. He spent the day in his quarters, writing, thinking,
Calculating. He pulled out his logbook, traced his finger down the entries. March 4th to June 6th, 94 days, 63 combat sorties, 4 confirmed kills, 16 pilots lost from his squadron, 42 replacements received, average survival of replacements 2.1 missions. The numbers told a story, the story of systematic destruction, not through dramatic battles, through attrition, through the slow grinding down of capability until nothing remained. That evening he received a letter from Katerina. Her handwriting was shaky, the paper was cheap. Wartime economy. Dearest Dietrich, the factory is running at reduced capacity. Food is scarce. The air raids come more frequently now. The shelter beneath the factory is crowded. We hear the bombs falling, feel the earth shake. Yesterday the factory 2 streets over was hit. They say 300 dead. I am frightened, but I think of you, flying above, protecting us. That gives me strength. I love you. I dream of when this war ends and we can marry. Your Katerina. Von Arnheim folded the letter, put it in his pocket, close to his heart. He'd stopped believing in victory months ago, but he still believed in protection, in duty, in flying because someone had to fly, because Katerina was down there, because surrender meant she'd face the bombs alone. Even hopeless projections had room for love. July 15th, 1944, 14:23 hours. Magdeburg. The radio crackled. Brenner's voice. Tight. Panicked. 3 on my tail. Can't shake them. Can't. Static. Then explosion sound. Then silence. Von Arnheim was 4 kilometers away, engaged with his own P-51. Couldn't help. Couldn't reach him. Could only listen. Another voice. Lieutenant Werner Adler. Brenner's down. Aircraft broke apart. No parachute visible. Von Arnheim killed his P-51. Finally. After 6 weeks of trying. 30mm cannon shell through the engine. The American fighter rolled. Trailed smoke. Pilot bailed out at 3,000 meters. Parachute deployed. He'd survive. Von Arnheim's 60-second kill. He felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pride. Just emptiness. Brenner was dead. 22 years old. 94 hours total flight time when he died. 6 combat missions survived. He'd beaten the statistics. Survived longer than average. For all the good it did him. Von Arnheim flew home, landed, shut down the engine, sat in the cockpit. His crew chief approached. Hauptmann, the mission report. Von Arnheim looked at him. 1 kill, 1 pilot lost. Net negative for Germany. File it under defeats. That night he wrote the letter. To Brenner's mother. In Bavaria, a woman he'd never met, whose son he'd trained for 3 days before sending him to die. Dear Frau Brenner, your son Oscar died bravely in defense of the Reich. He was a skilled pilot and a good man. His loss is deeply felt by all who served with him. He died doing his duty. You should be proud. My deepest condolences. Hauptmann Dietrich von Arnheim.
Lies. Most of it. Brenner hadn't been skilled, hadn't had time to become skilled. He'd died making a rookie mistake, fixating on a bomber, not checking his 6, the kind of mistake that got you killed when you had 94 hours of experience and faced pilots with 300 hours. But his mother didn't need to know that. She needed to believe her son's death meant something, even if it didn't, even if he was just another number in the progression toward defeat. Von Arnheim sealed the letter, added it to the stack. 14 letters this month, 14 dead pilots, 14 mothers who would receive official notification and a personal note from the squadron commander. 14 lives, reduced to paper and ink and lies about bravery. July 22nd, 1944, 11:47 hours, Berlin. Von Arnheim was on the ground when the raid came. Grounded, no fuel allocation. He stood on the tarmac and watched, counted the bombers, 300 plus, counted the escorts, 60 P-51s, maybe more, ones. They flew over, high, confident, unchallenged, heading for the industrial district. He knew what target they were hitting. Intelligence had briefed it that morning. Ball-bearing factories, East Berlin, critical war production. Katharina's factory was there, in that district. Von Arnheim watched the bomber stream past overhead, watched them proceed to target, watched German fighters, 12 total, all that could be fueled, attempt interception, watched the P-51s drive them away, watched the bombers proceed unmolested. 23 minutes later the explosions came, distant, rolling thunder, felt through the ground more than heard through the air. He waited, listened to radio reports, bomb damage assessment. Factory district hit hard, multiple direct hits, fires spreading, casualties unknown. At 15:10 hours the telegram arrived, delivered by motorcycle courier, official military communication. Von Arnheim knew what it was before he opened it, had known since he watched the bombers pass overhead, had known with the certainty that physics provides. Regret to inform you, Katharina Hoffmann killed in air raid 22 of July 1944, 1200 hours. Factory received direct hit. No survivors from production floor. Remains identified through work documentation. Formal notification to follow. Condolences. Berlin Civil Defense. Von Arnheim read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. Reality didn't change. Katharina was dead. Killed in a raid he couldn't stop. By bombers he couldn't reach. Protected by fighters he couldn't defeat. The whole catastrophe enabled by events that started March 4th, when P-51s appeared over Berlin. Cause and effect. Action and consequence. Logic, resolving to inevitable conclusion. He walked to his quarters, sat on his bunk, held the telegram, didn't cry, couldn't cry, felt nothing except vast emptiness. Someone knocked. Gessler. The major entered, saw the telegram, understood immediately.
I'm sorry, Dietrich.
Von Arnheim looked up. She was 24 years old, working in a factory, making ball bearings, supporting the war effort, and American bombers killed her. Bombers I was supposed to stop. Bombers I couldn't stop because P-51s kept me away. It's not your fault. I know. It's fuel production. It's strategic bombing. It's the cascading consequences of March 4th. I know all the reasons. None of them change the outcome. She's dead. I'm alive. The war continues. Gessler sat beside him, said nothing. There was nothing to say. Reality had spoken. Personal tragedy was just another data point in the larger equation. That night, von Arnheim got drunk. Deliberately. Methodically. Drank until the numbers stopped making sense, until the calculations blurred, until he could forget for a few hours that he'd failed to protect the one person he loved most. He woke the next morning with a headache and unchanged reality. Katharina was still dead. The war was still lost. The projections still pointed toward defeat. He reported for duty, flew his mission, survived, came home, repeated the cycle, because stopping meant confronting the void, and the void was worse than flying. August 1944, the accounting. Steinhoff called a meeting, squadron commanders only. Von Arnheim attended, Gessler attended, 12 others from across the defensive network. Krauss presented the statistics. 6 months of data, January through July 1944. The numbers painted a picture of systematic destruction. Luftwaffe pilot losses, 1944, 13,247 killed in action. This exceeds total pilot losses for 1940, 1941, 1942, and 1943 combined. The room was silent. American pilot losses same period 2,418. Exchange ratio 5.5 to 1. Unsustainable. Krauss flipped to the next chart. Pilot experience. January 1944. Average 300 hours total flight time before first combat mission.
August 1944. 92 hours. Quality degradation of 69%. Another chart. Fuel production. January 1944. 100% baseline. August 1944. 18%. Reduction of 82%. Another chart. Von Arnheim recognized his own training class data. 200 pilots graduated training in 1940. He'd provided the information to Krauss last month. Of Hauptmann von Arnheim's original training class, 200 pilots total, current survivors 3. Attrition rate 98.5%. Von Arnheim knew who the other 2 survivors were. Oberleutnant Franz Decker, flying on the Eastern Front, last heard from in May, possibly dead. Hauptmann Rudolf Stein, shot down over France in June, confirmed dead, which meant von Arnheim might be the only survivor, 1 from 200, 99.5% attrition. He'd survived through skill, through luck, through caution, knowing when to disengage, when to preserve fuel.
When to survive rather than win. But survival felt like failure when everyone else was dead. Steinhoff stood. Gentlemen, I'll be direct. We've lost the air war, not through lack of courage or skill, through numbers and fuel and range. The Americans have more aircraft, more pilots, more fuel, and crucially longer range. The P-51 changed everything. On March 4th, when Mustangs appeared over Berlin, our strategic situation became untenable. Everything since has been managing decline. He paused. Let that sink in. My recommendation to High Command: reallocate remaining resources to ground defense. Accept that we cannot contest Allied air superiority. Focus on making invasion costly rather than preventing it. Preserve pilots for potential future needs rather than expending them in futile missions. Von Arnheim raised his hand. General Major, what about the Me-262, the jet fighter? Steinhoff's expression didn't change. Oberst Kraus will brief current status.
Kraus pulled out another folder. Messerschmitt Me-262. Maximum speed 870 kilometers per hour. Armament 430mm cannon. Performance superior to any Allied fighter, including P-51. He paused. Current operational status: 47 aircraft operational. 19 additional in testing. Production rate approximately 60 per month. Problems: requires specialized fuel. High maintenance requirements. Vulnerable during takeoff and landing. Short operational range. Can it change the strategic situation? Someone asked. Kraus shook his head. No. Even if we could produce 300 per month, it wouldn't offset losses. And Allied bombers are targeting Me-262 production facilities and airbases. We have the technology 2 years too late. What if we'd had it in 1942? Gessler asked. Different war, Kraus said simply. But we didn't. We have it now, when it doesn't matter. The meeting ended. Commanders filed out. Von Arnheim remained. Arnheim.
Steinhoff approached him. How are you holding up, Dietrich? I'm functional, sir. Flying, surviving, killing when possible. Isn't that enough?
You lost your fiancé, Faulkner, Brenner, half your squadron. That's not nothing. Von Arnheim met his eyes. Grief is a luxury, sir. I'll grieve after the war. Right now, I just need to fly. Steinhoff nodded, understanding. You're the best pilot I have. Don't waste yourself on futile missions. Survive. We'll need men like you when this is over. When this is over, men like me will be obsolete. The future belongs to jet fighters and long-range escorts, pilots who trusted in calculations that stopped working. Then teach the next generation new assumptions, better assumptions, that account for the impossible becoming possible. Von Arnheim walked out, stood in the August sun, thought about that, teaching future pilots, passing on lessons learned. Except Germany wouldn't have future victories, reality guaranteed it.
By the time the war ended, there would be no Luftwaffe, no Third Reich, no need for the lessons he'd learned, just ashes and memory and the question of what all the deaths had purchased. September 1944. The jet dream dies. Von Arnheim flew the Me-262 once, evaluation flight, testing the jet fighter that was supposed to change everything. The acceleration was incredible, like nothing he'd experienced. 0 to 800 kilometers per hour in 90 seconds. The P-51s couldn't match it, couldn't catch it, couldn't compete with it in straight-line speed. But the fuel consumption was catastrophic. The Me-262 burned fuel at 3 times the rate of a Bf-109. Maximum endurance 45 minutes. Combat endurance 30 minutes, against P-51s that could fly for 6 hours. And the takeoff was vulnerable. The jet engines needed time to spool up. During takeoff and landing, the Me-262 was slow, defenseless. P-51s learned to patrol near Me-262 bases. Wait for jets to take off or land. Shoot them when they were vulnerable. Von Arnheim landed after his evaluation flight, taxied to the hangar, a marvel of German engineering. Too late, too fuel-hungry, too vulnerable, too few. What do you think? Steinhoff asked. I think we needed this in 1942. Now it's just expensive way to postpone the inevitable. The Me-262 program continued, but it didn't matter. 47 operational aircraft couldn't contest 3,000 Allied fighters. Production couldn't scale fast enough. Fuel couldn't support operations. Bases were bombed faster than they could be built. Technology couldn't overcome arithmetic, not when the numbers were this lopsided. December 1944, winter of despair. The Ardennes offensive began. Germany's last major counterattack on the Western Front. Desperate attempt to split Allied armies, recapture Antwerp, change the strategic situation. The ground forces needed air support. Needed fighters to protect advancing columns, needed bombers to strike Allied positions, needed the Luftwaffe to contest the skies. They got 68 fighters, total, for the entire offensive. The fuel didn't exist for more. The pilots didn't exist for more. The aircraft didn't exist for more. Allied air forces flew 7,000 sorties on December 23rd alone. 7,000 against 68. Von Arnheim flew 2 missions that month. 2. In December 1943, he'd flown 60 missions. The decline was precise, inevitable. His combat log for December 11th. 1 sortie, no contact, returned due to fuel. December 18th, 1 sortie, engaged 4 P-51s, disengaged after 8 minutes. Fuel critical. 2 missions, 90 minutes total flight time, 0 kills, 0 effect on the battle. The Ardennes offensive failed, partly due to Allied ground superiority, partly due to Allied logistics, but primarily due to Allied air superiority. The ground forces had no protection from the sky. Allied fighters and bombers attacked at will. The equations that had broken over Berlin in March were now breaking across the Western Front. Von Arnheim spent Christmas alone, wrote no letters, received no mail. Katharina was dead. Faulkner was dead. Most of his squadron was dead. The war was lost. He sat in his quarters, calculated fuel consumption, projected pilot losses, estimated time to complete Luftwaffe collapse, 6 months, maybe less. By summer 1945, Germany would have no functional air force, no fuel to fly, no pilots to man aircraft, no production to replace losses. The projections were inexorable. March 4th, 1944 had been the beginning. This was the middle. The end was coming. April 1945, the end. Von Arnheim's final combat sortie was April 19th, 1945. He flew a Bf-109K4, latest model, fastest variant, 1,500 horsepower, still slower than P-51s at altitude. He led 8 fighters.
Average pilot age 18.5 years. Average flight hours 64. Children, babies, lambs to slaughter. They encountered 30 P-51s over Leipzig. The engagement lasted 11 minutes. 6 German fighters destroyed, 0 American losses. Von Arnheim survived by diving away, preserving fuel, flying home. 2 of his pilots made it back. Lieutenant Werner Koch, 17 years old, 48 hours flight time, and von Arnheim. He landed, shut down, climbed out, knew it was over. The fuel was gone, the pilots were gone, the will was gone. Germany was surrounded, Soviet forces approaching from east, American and British from west. Berlin under siege, the Reich dying. Von Arnheim had 102 confirmed kills, 114 combat missions since March 4th, 1944. He'd survived when better pilots had died, lived when men he respected had fallen, endured when reality said he shouldn't. And for what? To witness defeat, to watch Germany collapse.
To see everything he'd fought for turn to ashes.
On April 30th, Hitler committed suicide. On May 2nd, Berlin fell. On May 8th, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. The equations had resolved. The calculation that broke on March 4th, 1944, had reached its final solution. Defeat, complete, total, mathematical, 1946, post-war interview. American intelligence officers came to interview surviving German pilots, document tactics, understand capabilities, learn lessons. Von Arnheim sat across from a captain, young, maybe 26, professional, respectful. Hauptmann von Arnheim, you have reputation as skilled pilot. 102 kills, survived entire war. What was turning point? When did you know Germany would lose? Von Arnheim didn't hesitate. March 4th, 1944, 09:37 hours, 25,000 feet above Berlin. The moment I saw P-51 Mustangs where they couldn't be. Why that moment specifically? Because it broke our assumptions.
We'd calculated that American fighters couldn't reach Berlin. That calculation was foundation of our defensive strategy. When P-51s appeared, that foundation shattered. Everything built on it collapsed. The captain made notes. But surely one battle. It wasn't one battle. It was revelation that our assumptions were wrong, that Americans had solved technical problem we thought unsolvable. If they could reach Berlin, they could reach anywhere. No safe distance existed. Our strategy became obsolete in single morning. What about later developments? Me-262 jet fighter, von Arnheim smiled, without humor. Too little, too late. We needed jets in 1942. We got them in 1944 when we had no fuel to fly them. Technology cannot overcome strategic numbers when the arithmetic is wrong by orders of magnitude. What should Germany have done differently? Believed the intelligence report from February 14th, 1944. Taken P-51 range seriously. Adapted doctrine before March 4th rather than after. But even that wouldn't have mattered. America had production capacity, pilot training capacity, and fuel resources we couldn't match. March 4th just made it obvious, made it undeniable. The interview continued for 2 hours. Von Arnheim answered every question. Honestly, technically, without bitterness. Just numbers, just facts, just the cold logic of how air superiority had been lost. When it ended, the captain stood, extended his hand. "Thank you, Hauptmann. Your insights are valuable." Von Arnheim shook it. "Captain, may I ask question?" "Of course." "Were you pilot during war?" "Yes. P-51 pilot. 8th Air Force, 4th Fighter Group." Von Arnheim felt something shift. "Were you flying March 4th, 1944, Berlin?" The captain paused. "Yes, that was my squadron's first Berlin escort mission." "What was your tail number?" The captain consulted his notes. 413885. Why? Von Arnheim closed his eyes, remembered. 945 hours. The P-51 that followed him through every maneuver, that didn't overcommit, that waited patiently, that forced him to disengage. "I think you were the pilot I engaged at 0945 hours. I broke left. You followed. I reversed. You reversed. I dove. You dove. I disengaged at 10:18 because of fuel." The captain's eyes widened. "Jesus. That was you I reported that engagement. German pilot who flew perfectly, never made a mistake, just ran out of fuel before I did." "Yes, that was me. You didn't defeat me through skill. You defeated me through fuel capacity. Your aircraft could fight longer than mine. That was difference. Not piloting, not tactics. Engineering." They looked at each other. Enemies who had tried to kill each other, now just two pilots discussing physics. "I'm sorry about your fiancée," the captain said. "I read your file, the July raid." Von Arnheim nodded. "War and bombs. You were doing your job. Bombers were doing their job. War has arithmetic."
Personal feelings are irrelevant. But they weren't irrelevant. They just couldn't change the outcome. The captain gathered his papers. "I'm Elliot Prescott, by the way, if you're ever in the States. Dietrich von Arnheim. And thank you." They shook hands once more. Two warriors acknowledging the mathematics that had decided their fates. 1975. Farnborough Air Show, England. Dietrich von Arnheim stood in the crowd. 59 years old, grey hair, civilian clothes, no uniform, just another spectator. The P-51 Mustang flew overhead, restored, maintained, beautiful, silver skin gleaming in English sun. The aircraft that had changed his life, changed the war, changed history. Someone stood beside him. American accent. "Beautiful aircraft, isn't she?" Von Arnheim glanced over. The man was his age, perhaps older. Grey hair, civilian clothes. But something about the way he watched the Mustang, the pilot's eye, tracking every movement with professional precision.
"You flew them," Von Arnheim said. Not a question. The American smiled, extended his hand. "Elliot Prescott, 8th Air Force 4th Fighter Group. And you're Dietrich von Arnheim. I'd recognize that accent anywhere. We met in 46, the intelligence debriefing." Memory flooded back. The young captain with the notepad, the methodical questions about tactics, the moment when they'd realized they'd fought each other over Berlin. "Yes," von Arnheim said, shaking his hand. "March 4th, 1944, you were the pilot I couldn't shake. And you were the one who flew perfectly but ran out of fuel first." Prescott's smile faded. "I've thought about that engagement for 30 years. As have I." They stood side by side, two old warriors watching the aircraft that had decided their war. "Very beautiful," von Arnheim said finally. "Very effective." "I've thought about you over the years," Prescott said. "Wondered if you survived the war. Glad you did." "I survived. Many didn't."
How many kills did you have by war's end? 38 confirmed. You? 102. None of them mattered. We lost anyway. They watched the Mustang fly, loop, roll, demonstrate the performance that had won the war. "March 4th was my first Berlin mission," Prescott said. "I was scared. Didn't know if we'd make it. Didn't know if the fuel calculations were right. Just trusted the engineers and flew. We didn't believe the calculations. That was our mistake. We dismissed intelligence, trusted our assumptions, paid for it. I shot down a lot of German pilots," Prescott said quietly. "Young kids toward the end. Barely knew how to fly. I think about them sometimes. Wonder if it was necessary." "It was numbers and fuel and pilots dying," von Arnheim said. "You had range. We didn't.
You won because the arithmetic favored you. Individual battles didn't matter. Strategic equation mattered. March 4th was the day that equation became undeniable. The Mustang landed.
The crowd applauded. Two old pilots stood silent.
I'm sorry about what happened to you, Prescott said. Your fiancé, your friends, your country. Von Arnheim smiled. Sad smile. War has costs. We started it. We paid them. The equations were always going to resolve this way. I just didn't see it until March 4th, until I saw your aircraft over Berlin, until the impossible became real. What did you do after the war? Taught engineering, university, ironic yes man who trusted wrong assumptions teaching correct physics. You, commercial pilot, flew 707s, retired last year, also ironic, spent the war shooting people down, spent peace flying them safely. They exchanged addresses, promised to correspond. Probably wouldn't. But the gesture mattered. As von Arnheim walked away, he looked back once. The P-51 sat on the tarmac, gleaming, perfect. The aircraft that had changed everything. Not through superior dogfighting, not through better armament, through range.
Through the ability to escort bombers anywhere. Through calculations that worked when German assumptions failed. That aircraft, more than any general or battle or decision, had won the war, had made strategic bombing sustainable, had enabled the systematic destruction of German war production, had created the conditions for Allied victory. March 4th, 1944. The day impossible became real. The day assumptions broke. The day the sky fell. Von Arnheim remembered it perfectly. Would remember it until he died. Not with bitterness, not with regret, just with understanding. War was numbers. The side with better calculations won. Germany had believed in wrong numbers, had paid the price. The lesson was simple, brutal, undeniable. Trust the numbers, test your assumptions, believe the impossible until proven otherwise, and understand that some equations have only one solution. March 4th, 1988, 44 years later. Dietrich von Arnheim sat at his desk in Munich, 72 years old now, 2 years old.
The study was quiet. Books lined the walls, engineering texts, aviation history, war memoirs he couldn't bring himself to read. On the desk, 3 photographs. The first, Katerina, young, smiling, taken in 1943 before the world ended. He picked it up, traced the outline of her face with his finger. 44 years gone. The ache had dulled, but never disappeared. You would have been 68, he said to the photograph. We would have had children, grandchildren, a life. But reality had decided otherwise. July 22nd, 1944, American bombs, her factory, no survivors. He set down Katerina's photo, picked up the second, Rainer Faulkner, in his Bf 109 cockpit, grinning, the confidence of a man who didn't know he had 3 days left to live. March 6, 1944, 31 kills, shot down protecting bombers that got through anyway. You deserved better than that fireball, Rainer. You deserved to grow old.
To drink schnapps and complain about jet aircraft and young pilots who didn't understand how to fly properly.
The third photograph, Oskar Brenner, 22, forever. Nervous eyes that had seen one combat mission before death found him on the second. July 15th, 1944. Von Arnheim lined up all 3 photographs. The people physics had taken from him. He pulled out paper. Began to write. Not for publication. Not for glory. For memory. For Brenner, who died confused about why his training wasn't enough. For Faulkner, who died doing everything right and lost anyway. For Katerina, who died making ball bearings in a factory he couldn't protect. For the mathematical certainty that had failed them all. His hand shook slightly. Age. Time. The same physics that governed fuel consumption and kill ratios also governed human bodies. Eventually all equations resolved to 0. He wrote for 4 hours. When he finished, he read it through. Nodded once. This was truth. Not comfortable truth.
Not heroic truth. The kind that mattered. The day the equation changed, he wrote at the top. March 4th, 1944. Outside Munich was dark. Inside, an old pilot sat surrounded by photographs of the dead, and memories of the day silver aircraft appeared where they couldn't be. 44 years later. March 4th, 1944, still felt like yesterday. Some equations never fully resolved. Some days never truly ended. Von Arnheim sealed the document in an envelope. Tomorrow, he would deposit it at the Aviation Museum. His testament, his final calculation. But tonight, he was alone with his ghosts. "I'm sorry," he said to the 3 photographs. "I survived. You didn't. I never understood the arithmetic of that." No answer came. The photographs stared back, silent, frozen in time. Dietrich von Arnheim, who had trusted in calculations his entire life, who had watched those calculations break on March 4th, 1944, sat in his study and waited for his own equation to resolve.
It would take one more year. Heart attack, 1989. But tonight, he was still here, still calculating, still remembering the day the sky fell. The legacy. Dietrich von Arnheim died in 1989, 73 years old. Heart attack. Peaceful. In his study. Surrounded by books about engineering and aviation. His papers were donated to an aviation museum. Among them detailed analysis of March 4th, 1944. Fuel calculations, performance comparisons, statistical projections, everything he'd learned about how air superiority had been lost. His final document, written in 1988, was titled "The Day the Equation Changed Lessons from March 4th, 1944. The conclusion read, "The appearance of P-51 Mustangs over Berlin demonstrated fundamental principle strategic advantage belongs to side that solves previously unsolvable problems. Americans achieved what we thought impossible fighters with one 300-mile range without performance compromise. This didn't just win battles, it changed warfare. Range became the decisive weapon, not speed, not armament, not maneuverability. Range, the ability to be present anywhere, to escort bombers to any target, to eliminate concept of safe distance. Germany's mistake was not technical. We could have built long-range fighters. Our mistake was psychological. We didn't believe it necessary, dismissed intelligence, trusted assumptions, stopped testing our calculations against reality. March 4th, 1944 taught me that impossible is temporary, that engineering can overcome physics, that assumptions must be constantly tested, that strategic equations change. The sky didn't fall that day. Our understanding fell. The Mustangs were always possible. We just refused to believe it, until belief became irrelevant, until reality forced correction. That is the lesson, not about aviation, about epistemology, about how we know what we know, about testing assumptions before they kill us. The equation changed March 4th, 1944. We learned too late. Future generations must learn faster. The document was studied by military academies, by strategists, by anyone interested in how technological surprise changes warfare. The lesson endured, the calculations endured, the memory of that March morning when silver aircraft appeared where they shouldn't be, when the impossible became real, when the sky fell. And Dietrich von Arnheim, who had trusted in numbers his entire life, left behind final wisdom. Certainty without testing equals defeat. Humility before reality equals survival. The impossible is only impossible until someone achieves it. March 4th, 1944, proved it. The day the sky fell. The day the equation changed. The day one aircraft type altered the course of war. The day Dietrich von Arnheim learned that some lessons cost everything to teach and cost nothing to remember.